apologize to everybody who's been killing time out there. Because, yeah, so I screwed that up. 11:30, we should start now. Thanks everybody for coming. My name's Keith Fuller. I am not actually Keith Fuller and Chris Hanks, as alluded to in the schedule. Chris was called off on a family emergency, and I'll be honest with you, I was going to lean heavily on his expertise. So we're largely going to make this up for the next hour. Hope everybody's cool with that. So the topic, as written, was founders' failures. And it was talking about issues such as why do you need an advisory board? What if your board of directors doesn't like the CEO? When do you get rid of him? How do you communicate that to your company? These sorts of things, and geared towards folks that are small business owners, startups, entrepreneurs, that sort of thing. I'll give you as small as possible pitch about my own background so that you have a sense of where we're going to head with the idea of failures today. I come from predominantly a AAA game development background. I started as a programmer and did 11 years stint in AAA. Saw a lot of dysfunction in the leadership realm. Saw a lot of ways to not do things and not treat your employees. As a result, for the past 5 years, I've been doing leadership consulting to fix all the things I endured as a studio developer. So everything that I think of is really geared towards fixing leadership issues and better treatment of game developers. That's my personal bent. So when we talk about how to address things that are of a failure nature, right? The first thing I go to is, well, where did the leaders screw up? So that's, just so you know, that's where my mindset is. And a AAA game development background isn't the same as an entrepreneurial two people in the basement startup background. Just so we're clear on that. That's one of the reasons I was really hoping Chris would make it today. Nonetheless, what I do endeavor to do as often as I can is talk with folks that are in a student background, startup background, because you're in a position to very early on fix a lot of the endemic issues that our industry faces. So the things that I have suffered through as a developer, you can fix at the company you start and never have to put people through the nonsense that I've experienced, right? So that's my viewpoint. So given all that, let me ask this, just kind of a quick survey here. And we'll start at kind of one level and go up. So folks that are possibly junior high, high school, college, straight up students. I'm a student right now, don't have a company, would love to be part of one, have one, just a student. Show off at just a student. I'm only a student. Right, only a student, come on. Okay, I was a student for 10 years to get my 4-year degree. So just a student is not, that was improper speech on my part. Okay, folks that have any semblance of a company at all, if it's 3 people with a name and a website, that's it. Any all the way up to I have 100 people or employees or whatever. So folks that are in a, okay. So that gives me a feel for where we're sitting as far as stuff we might be interested in. So let me tell you what I would love to do. I would love to have you guys run this because there are lots of things that I could preach on, love to preach, but that's not what we're here. We're here to fix problems as best as possible, to address things that are real to you guys. I want to start a company, I have a company, and I have questions about how to run it. How do I deal with this tough issue? Those are the things that I would dearly love to see addressed and fixed today. And that's not going to come from me talking so much as you guys presenting what's important to you. So given that, let me ask, yeah, go ahead. Or are you yawning? Were you yawning?
No, I had a question.
Okay, yeah, go right ahead.
So say that you started small. I have a 3-person company, and we're starting to grow, be a little bit more successful, but we never really clearly defined roles when we were starting out, and I think it's a good point for specialization. How do you do that without hurting people's feelings or something like that?
You are going to.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a fabulous topic. So if I understand it properly, so starting from a small company perspective, where everybody probably has to do a number of things, how do you deal with the concept of specialization versus you can't just be the high poly modeler in our 3-person company. You've also got to be the audio guy and the PR expert and the custodian, right? So how do you deal with that kind of balance, general versus specific stuff? Okay, that's a fair point. Do you mind?
Yep, full script.
Wonderful. So that's definitely a topic for discussion. Anything else? Yes, sir.
I actually was going to respond to that, but I
Oh.
can hold off on that.
You already have the answer? No, that's good.
Some that's worked for us, that's all.
Okay, great. Well, let it rip. What do you got?
Well, basically, key to specialization is pointing out how much work you have to do, and if you have to specialize, like we got one guy who does everything, like legitimately everything, and it's pointing out, hey, by us bringing in somebody who can do more of this, that means you can focus on what you want. You point out, hey, what are you really good at? Because not everyone can do everything flawlessly. Let's be honest. There's something we specialize in. Point out what they need to do best. Have them focus on what they need to do best. That way, you're not saying, hey, you suck at this. Stop doing that. You're saying, hey, you're really good at this. Let's have you get even better at this because you never stop learning. And let's have somebody who may be a little bit better than you are focus on this other thing so you can become like this awesome dude at this one thing.
Okay,
You
so
kind of sugarcoat it a bit, but you say you focus on what they're good at.
Do you have your leaders already established?
Pardon me?
Who are the people that are the key men
Oh,
that are going to have to?
I'm one of the founders.
Right, but is it really clear amongst your organization how decisions are made and what kind of an organization you're building?
Who's the person who has one more vote than everybody else?
Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty much. It's more just all of us go like, all right, it's a good idea. Yeah, okay, close.
So you're the benevolent development dictator then?
Not so much. I'm like high range, but I'm like I'm not the top guy.
Okay, so there's somebody else's.
Yeah, there's somebody who's like, this is my baby. This is what I want. And I'm like, all right, well, that's a good idea. Or hey, that.
And everybody knows it.
Yeah.
okay, yes.
So I'm also running like a kind of, well, I say I'm running. I'm also in a 3-person outfit that's not really a company yet, and so this goes right along with the leaders. How do you even establish leadership? I mean, you have to obviously have, you've got to decide who's going to take charge of certain things. So
You
what is the
incorporate
best-
it?
How do you even establish leadership?
Like-
A great place to start.
It's like, who's in charge of this thing?
Okay, that's an excellent place to start. And I'll toss this out. So a friend of mine who worked at the same big studios I did for a while, went indie a couple of years back, started a company with his brother. So 2 people, pretty much the smallest company you can imagine, right?
Who've all already been fighting their whole life.
Well, probably so.
A family company.
But yeah, but even they went to the trouble of drafting up articles of, hey, here's how the company works, here's if we have to dissolve it, here's who gets what, all of these sorts of things. I mean, a bunch of legal agreements, even though they're freaking brothers, right? So regardless of size of company, big, little, regardless of the closeness of ties, we've been dorm buddies for 8 years, or brothers, whatever. That sort of thing, you'd be amazed how important that is, to have those things laid out in advance. This is what we do to run the company. This is what happens if we can no longer run the company. Yes, in the back.
So going along with that, I've always been told, always expect the worst.
Always expect the worst.
Yeah.
You may be great best friends right now, but something may happen even 6 months from now. You guys may get in a big fight. What happens to the company? Where do your ideas go? So going with what you said, having a clear contract, even if you're best friends or brothers, like he was saying, make sure you have that.
Yeah, so when you do establish leadership, and we'll talk maybe a little bit more about how to do that, when you do, write it down, right? Don't just have an agreement over pizza. Yeah, totally, I'm in charge. No, not good enough. Yes, sir.
We're married and we did that.
You're married? I'm married
still
and I
married,
get that too. We aren't even in business together. So, yes. Oh, is it your Ron? Okay. And then
We spoke a little bit about this yesterday. I'm at a point in my company where we started down one route, kind of following the scientific method a little bit loosely, just figuring out, what the problem was and constructing a hypothesis around it. But now we're at the point where we've realized that there were some errors in our hypothesis, and so we have to pivot a little bit. So I'm trying to make that pivot and move forward because the first route kind of failed.
okay. So you're at the point where you had a hypothesis about why we're doing what we're doing, the nature of our business plan, these sorts of things. Come to find out, that hypothesis not actually proven true. Let's change some things. And so now, is that just kind of an observation or a question around that?
So the question then is how to then make that pivot and be able to implement, because we've had that failure, but the whole concept is not flawed, just the route that we were approaching it with.
Okay.
Is it the right team to do the new thing?
Yes. It was the actual process that was flawed.
Okay. So how to pivot? Yeah, in 3 easy steps, right? The third one being profit.
How do you show leadership without becoming alienated from your group?
How do you show leadership without becoming alienated from your group? Wow. That's a very good question. I can tell you from personal experience how to become alienated without even demonstrating leadership. I'm particularly well qualified in doing that. That is an excellent question. So assuming there's a need for leadership, and the leadership consultant is at the front of the room, so you can guess where I'm headed with that, how do you do it without actually, without aggravating the relationships that are involved, right? Okay, so that's kind of part of how do we even create leadership to begin with, which was the question over here. Okay, so let me just make note of that it's a fantastic topic. Yeah, and then I'm sorry, there was a question back there. Yes.
Yeah, just tag off of the roles and responsibilities thing. So yeah, with me, I'm a 3-man company, but just to throw that out there, I'm a web design company. So we contract people and design websites, right? Leadership's been established. Contracts, all that have been signed out. You know, every time I just hired my first man, and then hired another person too. This within a week span. So, you know, job description's been established. This is what you do. If you can't execute it, let me know. I'm the founder myself of the company, so there's no co-founder yet, no nothing yet.
Okay.
So I just, you know, we're at the point where we have clients and all that, but we're at the point where it's just like, where do we go from the first client on? So yeah, that's where my company's at right now. We have established.
Where do we go from the first? So we got a gig.
Yeah.
Where do we go from here?
Yes.
Okay, excellent question. And that kind of dovetails with something that was asked of Alan Wilson last night of Tripwire. I don't know if you guys stayed for kind of the Q&A of his talk, but somebody said, well, okay, so you did Red Orchestra 1 at one point, that went really well. Then you found out you grew a bit. How do you determine at that point what the next thing is? Was a good question. And he dodged it because he's a Brit. But I thought that kind of ties in with what you're saying. We got a client, now what?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. And then next to, yeah.
So if you're like making a game from the ground up with like somebody's, you've got like a written signed agreement where like you're tracking hours, you know your roles. How do you handle payment? We agreed like beforehand, like whatever we make, we'll split it based on hours, and that's like already written down. But going forward, like, what do you normally do in that situation?
How do you handle payment? So we got a check, and there's 5 of us. Who gets how much?
Yeah.
How is
Okay.
your corporation structured?
Bunch of college students who just wrote some stuff down and signed it.
Okay, so you don't have an LLC, you don't have. There's some fundamental work you've got to do to get to a place where, because depending on the structure you have, it can affect how distributions are made and what you're able to do in terms of membership and that sort of thing in an LLC. So you kind of need to get a good accountant and a good attorney, and they're gonna help guide you on those. So you need to figure out how you're going to pay for professionals that are going to be able to keep you both legal and accountable tax-wise.
I will say that I'm a one-person company, and one of the first things I did was get an attorney because stuff with dollar signs scares the pee out of me. So I completely understand why that would be a concern for someone with more than one person involved, and money has already come in. So that's totally legitimate. If there's only one thing I learned from 8th grade social studies, chances are there is only one thing I learned from 8th grade social studies. It's, where's the money? Thank you, Ms. Blau. So yes, what do we do with the dollar signs? Excellent point. Okay, so here's what I want to do. I realize that we could probably, odds are, stay here for like 8 hours and kind of come up with questions and at times address them, at times kind of launch into digression. We could fill this entire thing. What I need to do, however, is focus a bit so that we actually address the things that have been raised and not just keep asking questions until lunch, which is the easy way out, but I'm going to endeavor to do better than that on your behalf. So let me look at the top here, and let me just actually read what we have written down. So roles and responsibilities. I realize this is like 1-point font for folks in the back. I apologize. Leadership, how to agree. Do you have the DNA to succeed? Okay. Put it in writing. Yes, please do that. Product market fit, how to pivot. And then how do we account, right? Dollar signs. What do we do with those? Okay, so there's looking at roles and responsibilities, and we had a couple questions early on. How do you establish leadership? How do you do it without alienating people? One of the first things that I would consider is a favorite saying of mine is that a 50% answer to a 100% understood problem is better than a 100% solution to a 50% understood problem. That's the longest possible, most confusing way of saying, do you know what the problem is? What are you trying to solve? So if you don't have a great grasp on that, and that sort of gets into the product market fit, how to pivot, gets into that territory. If you don't know what you're solving, how can you determine the proper assignment of roles and responsibilities? So that's definitely part of it. Make darn sure you understand what the problem is. So in other words, okay, we're starting a game company versus pure web advertisement company. Okay, that's one way. In games, what are you addressing? Specifically a platform, specifically a technology, specifically a demographic? Is it work for hire? We'll do anything for anybody as long as there's money involved. What's the nature of the work that you're doing? I would say that's probably a pretty good place to start.
Are you being both the developer and the publisher, or are you going to have a relationship with one?
An excellent point. So business relationships are absolutely going to be key there as well. Are you Warren?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, just another commercial. Every human in this room needs to apply to the DSGA because this is exactly what we spend 9 months teaching.
Yes.
Anyway, end of commercial today.
That's your one, Warren.
What's the .com? I didn't hear.
Hey, I am shameless.
No, I'm serious. I don't know how to get you on the web.
What's that?
How do I Google it?
You look up DSGA, you'll probably do it.
DSGA.
Or you ask me for a business card. If you have a 3-person company, I'm not sure why you care about roles and responsibilities. You need to care about who gets the one more vote. You need to care about your legal structure and all that stuff. I mean, at IonStorm, there were 4 partners. And there was nothing in the incorporation agreement that said how they resolved disagreements. So if it was 2-2, you were dead. And there was no way to get partners out. And at some point, 2 of them wanted to get the other 2 out, and there was no way. So I mean, you need a legal agreement. You need lawyers to help you with that. But in terms of actual job titles and responsibilities, if you're a 3-person company, don't think about it. Make your game. But as you grow, that's when roles and responsibilities become really important. And my advice would be, don't make it up. You're not going to get the answer in a 1-hour roundtable. There is prior art on that. If you want to learn about team structures and development methodologies and job descriptions and leadership, there are books about that. There are entire programs about that, hypothetically. Don't make it up. Okay, go do your homework.
Go to school.
And then
Go to school. Stay in school, kids.
Never leave.
Like making contracts and doing your actual signing contracts.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
You had four partners.
Oh, no, I wasn't there when I was the 5th partner. And they figured out, they figured out that 2 versus 2 wasn't going to work.
Okay.
So I was the 5th.
All right, so a point that's raised there is if you're 3 guys, just do it. And I will say on the face of it, that's entirely fair. To that, I will add the following. So the idea there is, listen, you need to make the game, right? That's why we're doing this. We're not sitting here to drop legal agreements and pay attorneys and then just go our separate ways. We're here to actually do something. Make a game, make an app, make whatever it is. We're making things. So that's what we're in this to do. If we're 3 people, 2 people, great, that is the goal, absolutely. So freaking do it. That I get. And it seems as though anything that isn't building the thing is a distraction. Right? Well, I'm not writing code, making art, getting audio in, whatever. It's a distraction. Not so. Not so. Right? Stuff like taking the time to get legal agreements, to get an attorney, having a marketing plan at some point. Wow, that sounds like if you're a programmer, that sounds like the crappiest thing you could ever have to do. I have to, what? Really? And it is so much more important than the code you're writing, you don't even believe it. So there is a point at which you need to do things other than making the thing. And these sorts of things figuring out roles and responsibilities before you need them, coming up with a business plan, marketing plan. That's a big part of that. And I think the cautionary tale that was being listed about IronStorm, right? If you don't have a decision-making process when it's time to make a decision, you're hosed. You need it before it's time to make a decision. Don't find out, oh wait, we're completely deadlocked and there's only 2 people on each side. What do we do? Figure out how to handle that beforehand. So, yes, closing comment on the topic.
Just to clarify, I think I may have been misunderstood. What I'm saying is don't worry about who your lead level designer is as opposed to your rigger. When you're 3 people, that's what I meant in terms of roles and responsibilities. Don't worry about titles and don't worry about having a hierarchy or a complex structure. You don't need a matrix structure for 3 people. Just make your game, but you still need the legal agreements and the decision-making process and all that. I'm not saying you don't need that because get a lawyer. Just get a lawyer.
Yeah, do that.
Yes.
Do the thing with the lawyer. Okay, so this is originally your topic. So you raised your hand. Let me get.
So the real answer that I wanted to get is you've mentioned several times the +1 vote. How do you decide when you've got 3 people working on their own spare time? You don't really need it, but if you had a 4th, like if you have an even number, how do you decide who gets the +1 vote?
It's always been me.
It's either a coin. It's simple.
No, the bad answer is someone's going to be that person. I don't believe in natural leadership, and hypothetically there might be a program where we teach you the skills of leadership, but in a 3-person company, someone's going to be that person, inevitably, and you just need to recognize that and not let egos get in the way.
Okay, so kind of organically it'll happen. Else hire Warren. He'll be the voice. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Before I say what I wanted to say, let me answer your question. The first thing you do is as you just mentioned, you got to take the ego out of it. So what the easiest thing to do is to be as impartial as possible. So when we get into those situations, we either flip a coin, 2 out of 3, or Rochambeau. That's it.
I'm a fan.
That's it. You do that, boom, and everybody agrees that that's what you're going to do, and they abide by the decision regardless of whether or not they like it. Okay. Now, having said that, I'm a member of PMA, Project Managers Anonymous. We meet once a week, and therapy's really good. However, as a believer in project management, the first, if you don't set the foundation, then you're building a house of sand. And the foundation is really, really simple. That's identifying who all the stakeholders are. All right, obviously the people that are involved in the company are the prime stakeholders. And then understanding each other's needs, wants, and expectations. And then, so you ask each other those questions. What do you need from this? What do you want from this? What do you expect from this? And then you turn those into requirements that must be met. Because if they're not being met, people are going to get pissed off, and if people get pissed off, they're not going to do as good work, and if they don't do as good work, yeah, good luck trying to sell your game. So just do that first, and all these things fall into place.
And I think this ties in with the comment that we had earlier, which was there is no, especially at this stage, right, there is no right way to do it. There's no one way, like, oh no, you're doing it the wrong way. That's not how you lead 3 people. No, there's no right way for that. If it comes down to, you know what, it's Tuesdays and I get to be CEO on Tuesdays, so I said, okay, great. If that works for you guys, God bless you, good luck. Right, but there's no right way, there's no wrong right way to do it. Yes, comment.
So we're the family. We're still married, by the way. And we also had my sister-in-law involved.
Oh boy.
So we were trying to
3 family members.
Yeah, we were trying to keep this so we want to kill each other. So our agreement was that we would vote with shares, and the way you get shares is what you put into the company. Like for every dollar you put in, you had a share when we started the company, and then as we're doing more work, you have option to buy shares. And really, it's just the shares that give votes. So that way, like it makes it really clear and laid out. We did incorporate. We did an S corporation.
Which I regret.
Because my sister-in-law is awesome, but she got really sidetracked and didn't end up being able to do anything, which worked out fine because she didn't really have any shares and she never put anything into the company to begin with. So we're not stuck, with this, equal partner who hasn't done anything.
I'm going to give you the word vesting. It's a very important way when you're allocating shares, that they actually, I mean, it's a time over money, right? But look at how you want to create your vesting schedule, so that you don't,
in our agreement as
you don't actually distribute shares until people actually prove that they're vested.
Yeah, and honestly, the library was the best resource for me. There are so many books out there, and it just takes time. You have to really.
I mean,
this is
really
your job.
print it on paper and everything?
No, yeah, put it on paper and everything. But I mean, you really have to look at it as like this is your job. Yeah, making the game is part of your job, but this is your job. So take it seriously and do the homework.
Okay, so points to take away from this. Shares are an idea, establishing shares based on what you put in, right? And you can actually do this with family and have it work and not kill each other. So these are important takeaways. Yeah, there's a comment that, yes?
I was just going to say, if you haven't read a book called The E-Myth,
Yes.
I would definitely recommend it. It goes through step by step, like how to define roles, what do you do when the company grows, how do you replicate the success you've already
I used to
had.
buy those by the case and give them away. It's
The
a
E-Myth
great
is
book.
fantastic. You just
The E-Myth.
Google it, The E-Myth.
E-Myth or
it-
D?
The E is an entrepreneurial myth.
Yeah, for those of you who don't read, who listen, it's also available on Audible. And it like step by step goes through this whole thing. It talks about the reason small businesses fail and ways to break those myths down and help you recognize that, you know, there are different people who are better in different roles and you need to focus on what's going on.
Yes, and I think that's actually the book I was thinking of earlier. Couldn't really remember which one it was. That is exactly what I was thinking of, and that involves, wow, if you think that the idea of writing something down about how you and two other people agree on leadership issues, if you think that's a huge distraction, this book has plenty of huge distractions for you. I mean, it's page after page of things like, well, write down your job description and talk about contractual agreements, all these sorts of things, which most of the people in this room that have been through the problems inherent in leadership difficulties, co-founder disagreements, will tell you are all super important, and oh my gosh, I wish we had done those, right? So it sounds burdensome. It's really helpful material. Pick up the book. Yes?
By Michael Gerber.
Michael Gerber.
Yeah. And it keeps revising it. One of its things is not work in your company, but work on your company. And look at how you're going to manage to build more capacity and not become basically the bottleneck by limiting its the founder's dilemma, basically.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and so part of this, your question originally was, well, how do we talk about leadership issues and instantiating these things without alienating people, right? And I think part of that was in the there's no right way solution. So if it's I get to make decisions on Tuesdays, okay, well then everybody understands, right? We all agree. We write that down. Here's a paragraph that says I get to make decisions on Tuesdays. You get it on Thursdays, and then we move forward. It's an understanding. Everyone agreed to it. Done. Whatever that understanding is, get everybody to discuss it openly. Write it down so there's no misunderstanding, and do that as equitably as possible. Another thing to consider, talked about shares back there. Maybe there are 3 people involved, and one of them kind of sort of does this stuff as a day job, and the other 2 are pinning all of their financial hopes on it. They have more invested. They get to make decisions on Tuesdays and Thursdays, right? I mean, it's those sorts of things. But if you have that agreement in place ahead of time, when the need arises, there shouldn't be difficulties about understanding, because you just pull out the placemat that you wrote it on at Denny's, and it says, look, this is what we agreed to. You signed right next to the coffee stain. So another question we had here, do you have the DNA to succeed? I didn't actually write that, Jay.
I made that part.
Did you make that up? Okay.
Yeah, I made that.
Okay, when you wrote that down, what were you thinking about?
Well, so you're talking about building a team and establishing leadership. And one of the things that I see happen for companies is that they don't necessarily understand all that it's going to take when they start to make sure that they have the right talent to make it happen. One example in the game space that I see is that today, if you're going to build a culture-based, or I call community-driven brand, you probably ought to have somebody who gets community management as part of the DNA of your team. And that wasn't true when we were just building and shipping in retail. But today, you need to have that as a core competency of the organization. And I think, leaving a certain amount of room to grow where you haven't allocated all of your equity and said this is all we're going to be able to do, and being open to who that group of people is that's going to make you a success is part of the process of building an entrepreneurial new venture that's going to succeed. So don't necessarily think just because these are the two founders, this is all that's going to be on our executive team that's going to help run a successful organization. Think about, okay, this is who we started with, but what do we need to do to really thrive at whatever the business opportunity is that you've identified.
Excellent point. And what I'll toss out quite immediately, because I'm wonderful at playing devil's advocate, not so helpful at delivering meaningful, concise answers. Here's a counterexample. Who knows Vlambeer? Familiar with the company Vlambeer, nuclear throne, right? All these loftrousers, ridiculous fishing. Okay, how many people are in the company? Anybody know? Two people in the company. When they started, and I don't honestly know how many years ago it was, do you think they sat down and said, so what do you do? I can program. How about you? I can program too. Great. All the skills we need. Let's make a company. Chances are that's not how that went, right? However, fast forward to today, it's arguably one of the most well-known two-person indie teams on the planet, possibly one of the most successful and widely lauded, and they've made it work somehow. They just, over the years, Rami said, I guess I'm the guy that does biz dev and flies places. And they just kind of sorted that out, right? So that's sort of the counter example, right, to the idea of, well, figure out what you need first and get all those assets lined up. However, let me also introduce you to the term, if you're not familiar with it, survivorship bias. If you're not familiar with this, basically what it comes down to is this. The first sighting in the wild of the idea of survivorship bias dates back to bombers returning from bombing runs in World War II. And people are looking at the ones that are just shot to heck. This is horribly, horribly inefficient. Send out 50 bombers, one comes back, right? Horribly inefficient. So they look at the ones that come back and go, all right, your job is to figure out how to make these survive in combat better. So look at the ones that come back, look where all the holes are, and figure out where we need to put the armor to make these things more survivable, right? Well, the guy, thankfully, who was tasked with this job realized, well, we don't really need to worry about putting armor over the holes of the ones that made it back. We're worried about the ones that didn't make it back, right? So where the holes are in the ones that came back are okay because they made it. Everywhere else you get holes in your bomber, don't make it back. Let's fix those. Right? So that's kind of the concept of survivorship bias. Look at the ones that didn't make it back. So even though I just callously used a counterexample to Jay's incredibly well-crafted point, there is only one survivor that I can point to that elicits that counterexample. Who knows how many other two-person teams sat down and said, can you program? Yeah, can you? Yeah, that's all we need to make a company. And they failed. So when we're looking at failures, there's a really good chance that there are 1,000 Vlambeers that didn't make it because they didn't do what Jay just suggested. So that's like the 20-minute way of saying good point, Jay.
The indie press kit, where does it come from? It comes from Vlambeer. They got their DNA not just because they could code, but that they, I see them at every freaking conference, and I thought I was that guy.
Oh, no.
So, they're out there pressing the flesh and making it happen and building fame.
Absolutely. Okay, so we have two points here. Yes.
Who would be the first resource people to get on a small indie team? As you said, you need to get more people to actually become a company. But who would be those first people? Who would be the first jobs to fill?
Lawyers. Yeah. That's not a bad point.
No.
Well, I would say it's largely a moot point. Who do we need to make games if we can't make games? Right? I think that's when we talk about what's the problem we're trying to solve. If it's we need to make a game, then somebody needs to make a game.
I think from my bias, and I'm a strategic market consultant, so that's what I do, but I think you need to understand who your target, what you're trying to take to market, and then work backwards to then understand if you've got the talent and scope of a game to actually fulfill that need. Because once you understand, the platform, if you're on Steam and you're going to go after the RPG grognards, blah, 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 you know where your target is. Then you have to work backwards to say, can we make something that is commercially competitive in that category that's in scope of what we have the talent to do? And so that's where, I don't know if that affects your team, because the people you go into business with, it's worse than getting married in terms of the type of relationship you're going to have over the years. So,
Which is a wonderful institution, and we're not opposed to marriage at all.
No. But it's hard, and it's a lot of work, right? 31 years. And I've been in business with my wife twice. And my point being is that, picking what the talent is not a simple question. It's a very complex one. And understanding the people that you want to be in business with requires you to recognize, okay, this is going to be hard before it's easy, and we're making a lot of money. So you have to look at whether or not you have the same values, whether you're bringing a culture to it that a lot of people build companies they don't want to work for. Zappos guys tells this story really well, and he's got a book on it. But he's all about culture now, because he realized he has to build the kind of company he wants to actually be passionate about, and then sold it for $1 billion to Amazon. That's not bad either. But that's, I think, part of the challenge is you ask the right questions. The challenge is this somebody I want to be in business building whatever we're going to build together? And then do we have what it takes to be successful in getting that to market?
Absolutely. Now, we had a question in the corner. Yeah.
Yeah. I was wondering, going back to the survivorship bias.
Survivorship bias, yes.
So are you essentially saying taking seniority into account whenever it comes to what you do next?
Am I saying take seniority into account?
Like people that have gone through this stuff before, like.
Gotcha.
Well,
So all other things being equal, if somebody has run 10 marathons and this guy has never run a single one, which one should you listen to about how to run a marathon?
Okay.
I guess I'm saying that. That's a fair place to start. Does that help?
Yeah.
Somewhat? Warren?
Yeah, I'm going to be the voice of doom here. No one in this room can tell you how to succeed. No matter how much information you gather, odds are really good you're going to fail, because most games fail, most companies fail, and all you can do is create circumstances that might increase the odds from 1% to 2% that you're going to succeed. The analogy I always use is
Buy 2 lottery tickets.
but the analogy is, in order to get hit by a train, you have to stand on the tracks. In order to succeed, you have to find a way to stand on those tracks where success can hit you, right? There are a bunch of rules, there are a bunch of theories, there are a bunch of ideas, none of which will make you successful. You need a lot of luck, okay? It doesn't matter how great your plane is. The B-17 and the B-24 and the Lancaster bombers were great, and 1 in 50, don't know the statistic, but 1 in 50 came back. You're likely to be one of the 50 that didn't make it, right? So the best advice I can give is have a fallback plan.
Yeah.
Know what you're going to do when you fail, because you will, okay? And relish that. You're going to learn from it. If you're a real entrepreneur, you're going to stand back up and do it again. When I started Junction Point, I said, who gives a shit? If this one fails, I'll just do another one. And eventually maybe something will hit, who knows? But have a backup plan. When we lost our first deal at Junction Point, I had already been working on the second deal. When that second deal went away, I had already been working on the third deal, I won't tell you about the 3 months where I had to pay all of our expenses out of my bank account because my wife will divorce me. But
This is being recorded.
Yeah.
Have a backup unless you're going.
So the takeaway points there are, hey, success is really freaking difficult and honestly unlikely. But there are things you can do to improve it. A, you could show up at things like this, step in the right direction. B, and I think this is why you were an advisory board, have people that have some experience and some knowledge come on board to give you some level of mentorship, right? And then also have a fallback plan. if this doesn't work, what do you do, right? Residential landscaping is mine. That's where I'm headed when leadership consulting fails utterly. I'm going to plant bushes and shrubberies. That's my backup plan. So yes.
With pretty much every successful thing or successful group, you always see a string of failures really before they hit that one. Didn't Rovio have like 170 or something?
Classic example. Yeah. Yeah, Angry Birds was like their 51st project, right? And they were that close to being shuttered. Yeah. So, well, and this is the classic argument, right? Persistence, right? There's the great idea of do all the planning, have a fallback, whatever, but also what about the people that just made it through persistence? What are you telling us, Keith? And what I'm telling you is I don't think there is a 100% answer to that question of how persistent am I versus when do I resort to the fallback plan. I don't know that there is, but knowing that those are options and that people have made it work either way is all we can really do to inform you. Okay, so I'm going to have to move on a bit because we're heading towards the final stretch here. I think put it in writing is something that we've probably hammered as many times as we can in as many different settings. Whatever we've discussed, write it down.
It's always easy at the beginning to work on all the upside. Write the divorce agreement early, and that's the French start there before they even negotiate the terms of the business deal. They start with how we're going to close this thing down. Things have an evolution. They will come to an end in most cases. Figure those buy-sell agreements and the rest out early.
Absolutely. So the next point that we had, talking about product market fit. We're saying this was, Ron, you already asked the question. You don't get to raise your hand yet.
I was going to say that it's like my question, I think the underlying question of how to pivot more accurately describes it because it wasn't necessarily the product market fit that I was thinking of. For my specific example, it was more about the monetization model, but just having a pivot around.
Sure. Okay. So monetization model was really what was driving
business model.
Okay. Do we do premium? Do we do free to play? Whatever. How do we pivot around that? Okay. You have a
fallback plan.
Okay.
No, listen. When I started Junction Point, like I said last night, it was supposed to be digitally distributed episodic content in collaboration with Hollywood. I failed. Okay, my motto is fail gloriously. Okay, if you're gonna fail, don't fail in mediocrity. You know, you're gonna fail anyway. You might as well try something really big and audacious. What is it, a BHAG? You all know what a BHAG is? Big, hairy, audacious goals. You might as well shoot for the moon. But my fallback plan was, I'll go get a traditional publishing deal. If that doesn't work, I know what I'm going to do. When my first traditional publishing deal fell through, I had already been talking on the side with other traditional publishers. Have a fallback plan.
So you're saying if you're going to be one of the bombers that doesn't make it back, make sure you hit your targets?
Make sure you got a parachute.
Okay, so the question there really was, to put in perspective as best I understand it, I've got a team. We had an understanding of how we were going to do the thing, and now we're saying we still got the team, but we need to do the thing slightly differently than we said we were going to. How do we make that happen? And you wrote down build to last?
Well, it's where big, hairy, audacious goals and the building of your vision, mission, all that, how you're going to make decisions. It's another E-Myth level. The other one that I always give out is Blue Ocean strategy, because you have to understand how you're creating a value proposition in today's market.
Right. So another classic tome is what that is.
But it'll help you with some of those questions that you have.
So let me ask this. So this is kind of assuming that you have a team, you're sticking together, you've got a product, and you really, how do we make money off of this? We need to do that differently.
Right. The market assumption was that the certain model that we were going to go with would work, but that wasn't the most optimal monetization model because it was not sustainable.
Okay. So the two things that occurred to me there. First of which, how do we know? Right, what you just described, how do we know that? How did we get the information that says, oh, this route isn't going to work, so we need a different route? Right, so validity of your knowledge, do we truly understand the problem? So that's part of it.
Well, that's where the advisory board comes in.
That's where the advisory board comes in, that they can maybe look at that and say, yeah, really no one's doing premium anymore. You should do free to play, something like that. But then how do you actually do it? right? So depending on the pivot, I think is kind of an answer to that. But
Well, we, our incubator works on a revenue share model, and even though nobody's really been paid, we've had people for over 120 people over a year, and to resist the temptation to line you guys up and is, guys, we gamified the process, right? Right? We made a game out of it. The time you put in, the work you put in, you get XP points. When the checks start coming in, we divide your XP points by the team's points and write you a check. Boom, done. You know exactly how much you're going to get at any point in time. There's no question about it. There's, everybody's on board, and you get reputation points for turning things in on time and for quality and schedule and things like that. And, it works. And, Karl Marx would be proud, but hey.
So that's kind of rev share discussion.
Yeah.
Is sort of what that is. Okay.
But basically, that's how we account, and then and it keeps people motivated.
Okay. So let me ask this about kind of the idea of pivoting. What's the need there? Is it, hey, we've made this determination and we don't know if we have the people to do it differently? Is that it? Or
No, I draw a parallel to like Netflix when the market just wasn't ready to go completely online, and so they had to do a physical model for what they were doing in order to help build the infrastructure to get to the point where they want it to be. So, ultimately I think that our initial idea will be the route that we want to go, but as far as getting to a point where the market is prepared for that type of model, we have to do some kind of groundwork in order to get there.
okay. So it sounds like we're asking, well, if we're making a change, I don't know, do you have anything to offer them on
Well,
that?
the one thing I think of when you're saying this is a lot like making a great game. You don't want to innovate on too many vectors at the same time. And so when you're talking about your business model and how you're going to make money, especially when you're talking to investors, you better have a really good way of how you're going to get from point A to point B. There'll be a lot of people say, oh, we're going to be ad revenue driven off of this, and they're going to go get the brands to do it. It's an immediate non sequitur for any investor, because they know that the infrastructure that you're going to have to build to be able to have that is either that, or you're going to be on the Unity ad network now making plenty of money off of that. If you've got enough, it's still chicken and egg. How do you get enough eyeballs to get enough inventory to be able to sell that stuff? So look at business model. Pick something that's proven that you can execute against. Don't try to innovate on all levels.
True.
Yeah, that's a great point. You can, one of the things I tell everybody when they're pitching stuff is, what's the one new thing? Find the one new thing. You could fail gloriously trying to change one thing, but have that one thing that no one in the world has ever seen, because if you're just pitching something that everybody's already done, you're kind of dead.
Gotcha.
But as soon as I see a
but
pitch
don't
that has
innovate on
5
everything.
things, I'm out.
Yeah, no, 3 is too many. 2
Yeah.
is really risky. One new thing
Yep.
that no one in the world's ever seen before, and you're still going to fail, but at least you're going to be proud of yourself.
Fair point.
It wasn't as predictable as.
Yeah.
We've only got a few minutes. Can you talk about advisory board a little bit?
Yeah, so advisory board, I think that touches on a lot of these things, right? And the short answer that comes to my mind is, if you had a great advisory board, we wouldn't even have this session, right? It's kind of like just have an advisory board and then Jay and Keith can go drink coffee. Talking about an advisory board, to me, when I first started doing consulting, which was my first step out from under being an employee, I heard about advisory boards and I thought, that sounds like a good thing. Sounds expensive, like I should pay people to do this. And I don't know anybody that would really help me with any of this. And I would have to say that just about all of those, to my knowledge, are pretty much unfounded concerns. There are lots of people that are willing to to levy mentorship in your direction. In this room, you've probably already heard some, and outside of this room, you can find many others.
It's the DNA of accelerator incubators. The mentorship is a big piece of that.
To be sure. To be sure. So first item, lots of people, whether you realize it or not, are willing to provide some level of direction and assistance in these sorts of things. Do you have to pay them to do it? Well, I would love to be paid to be part of an advisory board, but I never have been. So I'll just throw that out.
Free lunch?
What's a free lunch? If you want to buy me coffee, that's a nice touch.
In Silicon Valley, there's a methodology. If you Google Founders Institute /FAST, there's a model for how you can give micro equity in your organization for your advisory boards over each phase of the growth of your company based on their contribution. So it's a metric.
Yeah, I usually get a
and I
very
highly
low
recommend.
percentage. Like, I get 1 or 2% of a company.
I start
down
with a
in
quarter
advisory
percent
board.
and let them earn up, but yeah. depending on what their role is, and that's why this.
It's not to say these people will always work for free. They can.
Yeah.
I don't want you to think, I don't have any money to give them, so I can't get anybody helpful. Not necessarily true, but yes, there are definitely models in place for giving people some measure of equity as form of payment. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that's really important. What you were just touching on is what we talked about earlier with vesting, and that's really important for an advisory board too, not giving them that entire stock up front, and it's based on, it vests over time that they serve on the advisory board, because you can have really lackluster people jump on there. And also think of it as a two-way street. I mean, it's not just for them to come in and tell you what to do, but it's also what can they do for the company as well.
Right.
Well, and how do you leverage and listen to them? I think a lot of teams don't know how to take mentorship well, and that's something you have to learn.
Short question, because I know we don't have time anymore. With forming your advisory board, for many of us, I probably don't have advisory boards. Advice or leadership towards help us prevent from forming a failing advisory board. What can you offer us here? Yeah.
Can I throw you
Sure. Throw me in as
So I happen to know someone very nearby. We're good friends for like the past 20 minutes, and is a member of an advisory board, and could probably give you some excellent advice on that very topic. And before he leaves the room, you should probably just ask him some questions. So that's what I would say along those lines. Okay, so we had a few other things. I feel a little bad about that. Not real bad, but a little bad. We have a few other things that we put down here and things.
These were just observations we've made.
Okay. Okay. So I know that we're supposed to let everybody get out of here to go have lunch. I personally am a big fan, dating back years and years, the idea that, sure, I'd love to sit and listen to 8 hours of all of your wisdom and unfettered knowledge. However, the mind can only absorb what the butt can endure. So I don't want you to be sitting here for the next 10 hours listening to us pontificate. If you have additional questions and you think there's a chance that we could answer them and still get to lunch in a reasonable time frame, please come up here and join us. Other than that, thank you guys for your participation. I hope you got something useful out of this.